Greetings and salutations. Today's video is going to involve Dr. Berg, who is a very influential YouTuber and who promotes the ketogenic diet and health advice in general. Now, if you came here expecting that I would be talking trash about the guy, I'm afraid I will disappoint you. You see, the man has done more for humanity's health than the rest of the internet combined. So all I have for him is respect and admiration. The ketogenic diet and the carnivore diet are definitely something that makes a lot of sense. If someone looks back at our history, cultivating grain is very, very recent in the grand scale of things. And therefore, it is totally logical that our bodies have been built to function optimally and utilize their full potential when we feed like we evolved to feed. However, there is a tiny detail which doesn't follow that pattern. And there, I believe, Dr. Berg might be wrong. And that is the consumption of salt. Now, granted, what he says makes sense about needing to increase the salt consumption when you switch to the ketogenic diet due to the body expelling a lot of liquids until it adapts, and in the process, also expelling a lot of electrolytes. But then I'm thinking, did the ancient man living in a forest and hunting to eat carry around salt? Do the tribes living in Africa wait around until somebody brings the salt so they can finally put some salt on the meat that they caught and then eat it? What about carnivore animals? Do they wait until some human comes along and sprinkles some salt on the prey that they caught before they eat it? None of this makes sense. Yes, sodium chloride is useful as an electrolyte. There is no doubt about that. But it exists in trace amounts in food. On top of that, there is also the sodium-potassium pump, which Dr. Berg also talks about, and which means that for the cells to create an efficient energy battery, they need a certain ratio of potassium to sodium. Also, with our modern carbohydrate-heavy diets, we deplete potassium and overconsume and retain sodium. And that creates a reverse ratio compared to the normal one. And that in turn creates a lot of problems like fatigue, brain fog, etc. The normal ratio for healthy function is 2 potassium to 1 sodium. But Dr. Berg suggests that we begin with 4 potassium to 1 sodium to fix the potassium depletion first. Well, this is kind of congruent with the sodium-potassium ratio that can be found naturally in foods. Since there are foods rich in potassium in nature, such as salmon, greens, nuts, and even red meat, and which naturally contain only very small amounts of sodium, why do we need to also consume sodium in our diet? Dr. Berg suggests in his website that we should consume 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt per day. 1 teaspoon is about 5 grams or 5,000 milligrams. Even if we take that low-end consumption of salt per day, that amounts to 20,000 milligrams of potassium per day, or 20 grams of potassium per day. That's a surreal figure that nobody can reach that amount of food realistically. And if we take the higher salt suggestion of 10 grams of salt per day, then we're talking about 40,000 milligrams of potassium per day, which is an utterly ridiculous amount of potassium that even eating the most potassium-rich foods cannot help you reach. To put things into perspective, to reach 40,000 milligrams of potassium per day, eating the most potassium-rich foods that exist, you will need the following: about 40 avocados, or about 50 cups of squash, or about 48 cups of salmon. I'm not mentioning other potassium-rich greens, such as spinach, beet tops, Swiss chard, because those are high in oxalates and cause other problems such as kidney stones and calcium deficiency. So they should plain and simple not even be consumed, when there are so many other alternatives which offer the same benefits without the oxalates, such as kale and broccoli. But you can see here that we're talking now about totally crazy and unrealistic amounts per day, unless you drop the daily consumed salt. And now those amounts become manageable, because they exist in proportion to the consumption of salt. So my guess is this: you may need more salt when you transition into a ketogenic diet because of the simple fact that your body dumps fluids, and with it, it also dumps salt. But after you stabilize, you should probably keep the salt consumption in low levels so that your potassium can catch up. More specifically, I think that after someone stabilizes his nutrition, he should go the other way around. Try to calculate how much potassium the meats, eggs, dairy, fish that he eats give him, and since the final ratio of potassium to sodium should be 2:1, he should then divide the milligrams of potassium that he receives to then find out the milligrams of sodium, of salt, that he will need to receive. Obviously, we should keep in mind that some of our foods already contain some salt, so we should factor that in when we try to reach an amount of salt, especially when we're talking about things like cheese and cured meats, which require quite a lot of salt to make. And then you add as much salt as would be required after that, if any. It would be amazing if Dr. Berg eventually somehow found this video and decided to make a video reply to it. Although this is very unlikely because our channels are not quite as famous as each other. But you never know, maybe one day. Until that time, I would also love to hear your opinions on that very important subject. Until the next time, be well and take care.